All right, we are back with your favorite podcast show of the week. This is Location Weekly, and it's episode number 463. And yeah, we're recording live on May the 5th. Hopefully, all of you Star Wars people celebrated May the 4th, and now, yeah, we're on to the 5th. So we've got Brianna is here as per usual, looking fine. How are you? What's going on? How's the life there?
Life is good, just plugging along and being creative, trying to keep kids entertained all the time. And, I'm thankful for my job and that I can work from home. And I have to admit, I am enjoying the extra family time. Like, that's the one good thing I can say I am really enjoying. I mean, it has its moments, don't get me wrong, but it's been nice. My kids are like, I have a 2-year-old. She turned 2 in September. So I guess she's 2.5, or, I mean, all you moms that do months, good for you. I don't do that. So, anyways, she's like, just since we've all been home, it's amazing to see how much more she is talking. Like, she was already talking well before. And I think that she's probably doubled her vocabulary in the past 8 weeks. It's just incredible. So, little things like that, moments that we would have maybe missed out on. So I am counting my blessings. How about you? How are things going?
Yeah, we're good. Just, same old, into the routine, and kids are trying to keep up with schoolwork. It's actually getting a little heavier than it was the first couple of weeks. I guess the teachers are figuring it out too. So everybody's getting their rhythm. Yeah, it's been a busy work week for me. Lots going on. Still trying to figure out what to do about our conferences for LBMA, and at the same time, lots going on with my startup too, like just tons of meetings and investors, and yeah, all kinds of interesting conversations. So it's good. But I'm glad we get to come together every week and do this, because it's something that's consistent, and it doesn't change whether there's a pandemic or not. So
I know, I agree.
Yeah, there you go. So all right, so we got 2 stories for you this week and 2 guests. So I'll let Brianna kick off with our first story, an interesting one from one of our members.
Yeah, so our friends over at Reveal, Brian and his team, have been awarded a patent for a system that determines the quality score of a mobile device. So this is based on the mobile device's location and accuracy. So it's a specific methodology that they've created, and they've been able to put a patent on that. And so it seems like they were, I would assume they filed for that a while ago and were awarded that. So that's part of the story. And the other part of the story is that they have received some new funding. So they had a Series A, and it was led by Bull City Venture Partners. And they also have investors from Alarion Ventures, Idea Fund Partners, Venture South, Wolfpack Investor Network, and Carolina Angel Network, amongst some others. So sounds like they are doing some good things. And they noted that, they have had a really strong 2019, that they have, maintained good growth even amongst the COVID crisis. And I mean, I don't know much about the patent, or, it didn't go into details on like what the exact methodology was, or what that process was. But, I think it's always good to be able to tout as a semi startup, and, one that is still raising money, that they have a patent or 2 or 3 or however many they have at this point. I think it's always good for them to be able to do that. So good for them. And congrats, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to call Brian up and get some advice on that piece of it for my startup. We filed a patent. Obviously, we're going through the process, and we're also raising capital. So maybe I can learn something from these guys. So, but anyhow, the one thing I did read about the patent is they said that like this sort of way of what do they call it, a device quality score. So that this sort of way of kind of scoring the quality of the data at that level, for folks that are location data providers, it can help kind of on the pricing of location data offerings based on sort of the quality of the data that they're kind of building their offering on. So that might be something that's, sort of beneficial to the industry overall. Who knows? But certainly an interesting way to think about it. I like that. They also did mention in one of the releases I saw that Jason Crocker has been promoted to Chief Technology Officer from
Yep.
was previously VP of Technology. So he's been with them for a couple of years and kind of has really sort of been one of the key guys sort of building out their stack and their technology, around all of what they're doing. The other thing is the round. It's an Series A that you mentioned, and the group of different funds involved. I did do some digging outside of the press release, and so it's $2 million is what they've raised in this round, bringing the total, I think, to about $8 million that they've raised over the last couple of years now. So yeah, looks like they've got some fuel to kind of grow and continue to sort of evolve in the market, and a patent to carry them forward. So good stuff. All right. So we have, as I said, two guests this week. The first is an interview that I did with actually one of our LBMA advisory board members, as well as she's heavily involved in the world of sort of big geospatial data. Her name is Denise McKenzie. She's the director of something called the Benchmark Initiative at Geovation, which is a UK-based sort of innovation hub around everything to do with geospatial data, and they have like co-working space and all that sort of stuff. So she was sharing some insights from the UK on what she's been doing during COVID. And then the second interview that you did with another good friend of ours, Walter Geer, who's the SVP of Group and Group Creative Director at TBWA World Health. So some good conversations, both of those there. So I'll just shut up now and let you hear what they had to say. So here's Denise first, followed by Walter. All right, I'm very excited this week because we have a longtime friend, LBMA board member, and just marketing geospatial guru on our show this week as a guest. It's Denise McKenzie. She's currently the director of Benchmark Initiative at Geovation. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Enjoying my lockdown time.
Yes, so that's what we want to talk about. So we've been doing a little special series the last number of weeks we're calling Members at Home, and just chatting with different individuals from various member companies all over the world, and kind of just getting a sense of kind of what it's been like. How has it impacted your routine and the way you work, kind of now working from home?
So for me, I've been a work from home person for 7 years now. So, office is nicely set up at home, fairly easy. So from a work perspective for me, it's been not that different. What I would say is there's more online meetings now. So you kind of get that fatigue at the end of the day after you've sort of sat through 7 different meetings back to back. So I'm trying these days to limit the number I'm having per day so that I'm not completely and utterly brain exhausted at the end of it. But I'm a mum as well, and so I think just that challenge now of having kids at home and trying to juggle working plus homeschooling has been a pretty interesting exercise. But I've been impressed with the schools at how they've managed to handle sharing information in that regard. But it's not too bad. It's not too bad.
Yeah. And I know for a fact you, like myself, prior to all this, would be at a lot of conferences, a lot of travel as well. How's that been, like, not doing that right now? Are you missing it? Are you like finding, okay, hey, it's kind of nice to be home and kind of connecting with family and whatever?
Yeah, I think so. For the first 4 or 5 weeks, I think actually definitely enjoyed having the break, not commuting up to London, not sort of rushing for a plane, etc. I probably am beginning to feel a little bit like it would be nice to have a bit more. What I miss, I guess, is that networking social component of what you do. And you have so many more serendipitous conversations when you're in a face-to-face type of environment. So I think I miss that. To that end, though, actually, we held amongst our sort of closer geospatial group of colleagues here in the UK, we held a Geo G&T drinks on Friday afternoon. And the rule was you had to bring a drink of some sort, but go out into your garden with your phone and talk to everybody on that. So we had a Zoom call for everybody to have a chat. And that was really nice. It kind of made the end of the week feel like it was the end of the week and you're all at the pub having a conversation. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's you sort of have to put a little bit of kind of the routines or the structures of kind of what it would be like at an event or whatever. Like I know I have friends who a married couple who they literally like get dressed, put on their shoes, and like leave the house in the morning like they're going to work, and then kind of walk around the neighborhood and come back to their office at home. So it's like they commuted.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always been lucky in that regard. So my office is actually separate to the house. So I do exactly that. I get dressed for work. I put my shoes on, try and avoid putting my slippers on, and put my shoes on and actually walk out the back door into the garden and down and open my office for the day and work from the office, which is good. I mean, it helps you build that balance, I think, between work life and home life. I know I've talked to some colleagues in recent weeks who are like, I've lost all track of what day of the week it is and whether it's night or day or what a work day actually is any longer. And they're just kind of working all the way through it. And I was like, no, I said, that's not good. So I think it takes discipline, but it's really important to try and actually block out and define your work day and your home life. But that's been nice because actually I think we've probably spent a lot more time with kids and done more family things in that way.
Good. So from a business perspective then, like one of the things that we've been hearing a lot of people talk about is kind of just finding new technology, new tools, new ways to kind of stay connected to colleagues. Obviously everybody's on Zoom or what have you. Like, have you found any interesting new technologies to make life easier or more efficient?
Yeah, I don't know about more efficient. I mean, I'm an absolute convert to Trello. We even have family Trello. So I've got my work Trello, and actually we have a family set of activities that all get prioritized in the same way. So I love Trello for that. Slack is a great one as well, and I've got a variety of ones with that. So my women in geospatial activities, all of that gets organized through our colleagues in that, and that's international. So it's kind of lovely hearing, we had a whole sort of event on that where people were sharing pictures of their home office setups, and it's just something simple and easy, but actually keeps you connected with everybody. So that's kind of fun. I think my favorite new tool though was introduced by one of our entrepreneurs on the Benchmark program, and it's a thing called Miro. And Miro is a collaborative virtual whiteboard type of space. And they really ran probably the best online workshop I've ever been part of, where they were able to break us all out into small groups. They had the Miro board set up really well, and we were moving kind of sticky notes here and adding notes there, and everyone was in it kind of creating. And it really kind of felt like you were actually functioning together with a whiteboard in front of you.
Awesome.
And so suddenly that barrier of being, remote and being online was just gone. And we had a really constructive kind of few hours. And I think for me, they're those sort of experiences which really make you stop and wonder, for all of our travel and things we do, how often do you really need to do it? And so I've sort of started wondering what work practices are going to look like at the other end of this, and what businesses are going to do change-wise, because people realize actually you can probably have a better work-life balance working a bit from home and a bit from the office.
Yeah, I did I think it's a great point. I did an interview last week for a US reporter, and it was he was representing the real estate industry. And I said, it's going to be very interesting to see what the impact coming out of this is going to be on commercial real estate in terms of, businesses, office space and rent and all of that, whether people actually need that much space, that they had previously had, or if they're really going to downsize and, have this sort of many more people working from home because they realized it's okay. It works. Like I can do this. And
I think collaborative spaces as well. I mean, if you look at Geovation, where I work at the moment, is a huge kind of incubator collaboration space. And so at any given time, you've got sort of 50 companies that are all using desk space. But the great thing about that is the serendipity of bumping into somebody, having a coffee, and standing around and suddenly realizing actually realizing the work you're doing actually has a connection point. And the only way you're ever going to have those sorts of meetings is because you're working in a shared and collaboration space. So I think it'd be interesting to see whether more of that starts to appear too, where companies actually share spaces.
Yeah, very cool. All right, last part is, one interesting thing that I think that's happened with COVID is a lot of our member companies have been able to find ways to use their product, their solution, to sort of either help the government or just help other businesses or just help consumers in general, sort of deal with different things. Last week we talked to Kami from Glimpse, and they're obviously, their technology is all about last mile delivery, so they've been heavily working with the restaurant industry and the grocery industry in terms of getting food delivered to home, or groceries delivered to home. So business is on the rise for them during this time. But have you seen any of the companies you're working with there in the UK or otherwise kind of be able to kind of take what they've built and kind of repurpose it for COVID benefit?
So, I mean, look, one of my favorite stories with repurposing is actually even my daughter's high school, and their art teachers who usually have a 3D printer, and they had a production line going where they repurposed the school's 3D printer to print safety masks to give to the NHS. So the sort of fabulous plastic masks there. So I've seen some really interesting things there. I guess across the board, looking at, so I put my other hat on as the chair of the AGI, we've got a lot of members that are working in a huge range of different areas at the moment supporting the response. Obviously, Ordnance Survey is doing a large amount to offer mapping data generally, and have changed their licensing model for people who are doing response work in COVID sort of areas. We're seeing lots of the geospatial companies actually begin, obviously doing modeling, and not just kind of spread, but also beginning to look at things like the modeling of what will happen when we start going back. So the different scenarios of different groups of society and what that might mean, what the dispersion might look like. So looking at transport behaviors, etc., along the way. I think also we've seen, particularly moving into looking at this kind of tracing concept, there was a lot of companies that already had data processors and platforms that did a level of anonymization anyway. And a lot of them are now looking at, well, can I change my platform to mean that we could trace it better using this? And so I think that we're sort of seeing a number of organizations, and particularly in our startup space within Geovation, that are saying, well, actually, could we tweak this slightly now and do some more work in that space? But I think, it's also raised some really amazing questions in all of this conversation too. I mean, it's wonderful to see, finally our somewhat niche at times interest in location data being front page of newspapers around the world. And, the part of the benchmark program that I work on is obviously the ethics side of using location data. Right. And so as horrible as a situation as COVID is, it's also brought about some really important conversations that a lot of governments and businesses are having with each other at the moment about how we share data, why we share it, and what are the safeguards that you need to have within that space too. So it's kind of like that silver lining type of thing. This has been a horrible, horrible health experience, but actually it's caused a whole variety of conversations and new technology and changes that probably wouldn't have happened, at least not at this speed, otherwise. So, certainly we've seen a lot around here, and I think that's only going to continue to increase. What I guess we're seeing more of now is the applications where it's looking forward to the future. How are we going to help get businesses back up and running? How are you going to do things going to help stimulate the economy? And I think what are the new economic opportunities that are actually going to appear at the other side of this are becoming really hot topics of conversation amongst a lot of businesses here.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I think from a consumer perspective, I think the pendulum is kind of coming back almost to the middle now. There was, for the last number of years, when you look at location data and from a privacy perspective, there's been a big sort of move towards, just locking it down, being much more restrictive, and sort of in favor of the consumer, if you will. And now I think COVID in some ways has caused that to come back to the middle a little bit, because people are realizing there is a lot of value in this data, and it can be used for really good intentions. And it's not all sort of, hey, we're tracking you and we're violating your privacy and all this stuff, right? There is some of that, no question, but the reality is there's a balance to it. And I think the dialogue is COVID's bringing that dialogue to the surface right now. And I think that consumers, interestingly enough, as much as governments and businesses are realizing that they're going to need to sort of allay a bit of that sort of privacy concern to have a greater benefit of protection. In this sense. So, it's interesting. Like I wrote a piece about it, about exactly that issue about a month ago now, when this was all sort of happening, and it got quite an interesting reaction from the press, as well as from the member base. But overall, I think people are, in the U.S., for example, they relaxed the rules, the regulatory rules around health data, the HIPAA laws and so on, because people needed to go into emergency situations in hospitals and get treated, and the doctors needed access to their health records, and normally you can't just pull that up, just like that. So they had to sort of relax the laws on a sort of temporary basis in order to provide these, the data that's needed to treat these people properly. And I think with the same needs to happen in emergency situations around how we use location data. I think temporarily we need to allow this type of access to ultimately protect the population and so on. I think it's no different. And so anyhow, I'm completely with you. I think the dialogue it's a good time for dialogue and to have these discussions about ethics and controls of data and use of data. So anyhow. Awesome. Well, thank you. So appreciate your time. Again, we've been chatting with Denise McKenzie, a longtime great friend of the LBMA. So thank you so much. Stay safe and healthy and well to you and your family, and we really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks very much, Asif.
All right. Hey, everybody. This is Abriana Lopez with Location Weekly, and I am here with Walter Geer from TBWA World Health. And we are here doing another interview for members at home. Walter, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm probably the longest title at the company, Senior Vice President, Group Creative Director, Head of Digital and Innovation. That's a mouthful. But my role essentially here is really running digital and innovation and coming up with the big ideas. My team is kind of design, development, and UX.
Important stuff. Yeah.
It's all important stuff, right?
It is. And I don't even remember how we got connected, but I think you used to be in Atlanta at some point. And then it's been a long time though.
Yeah, so I was supposed to speak at a conference for LBMA.
Yeah.
Yes, I said it wrong. I apologize. Yeah, I was supposed to speak at a conference down there, and I'm not sure how we totally connected, but it's been some time now. I feel like
it has. Yeah, but I think we've been. I don't know. We've messaged a few times back and forth during quarantine. I've definitely been following a lot of the content you've been producing. You've been pretty busy, balancing a job and just pushing out tons of interesting conversations with everybody from, creative digital world to celebrities. And, it's been enjoyable to watch.
Thank you.
The conversations are just like all over the board, but I think so is everybody's minds right now. So how have you been spending your quarantine? How's it going?
Oh boy. Yeah. So spending quarantine between kids, kindergarten homework and trying to figure out how to get back to my addition and things of that nature. And then also just trying to get into this work stuff. And then at the same time, really inspire people. I think that we're all in such an awkward time and a weird time. And I feel like everyone is saying that right now. But it's about what do we do? When we get on the other end of this, what are some of the things that you did to help other people, right? So my thing is how do we engage people and how do we have conversations that just, involve and include everyone and just make everyone feel like this is okay?
Yeah. I think that's so important, just having that, day-to-day encouragement from every perspective. I mean, sometimes it's more for me, it's like, okay, I can't make, I'm not a medical professional. I can't make a dent in that area right now, but I just got to make sure that my kids are okay, and that when they come out of this, they think it was like the best time ever because their parents were home and they got so much family time. But then there's other times where I'm thinking from an industry perspective, and like, how can we be making an impact, and what can we do, what can we bring awareness to? But it's definitely like a hard line to walk, and we were talking before we started recording about parenting during this and being home with our kids, and there's definitely some struggles, but I don't know, for me it's definitely secured the idea that I'm not supposed to be a homeschool parent or a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, you and me both, and their salaries need to go up like significantly.
I think everybody is all for that. Yeah. So, from a creative perspective, what has sort of been like your approach during this time, and that probably changes a few different ways based on whether you're talking to consumers or colleagues or peers. But, I'd kind of love to hear how you've been forming that, because I'm sure it changes every day.
Yeah, it has changed quite a bit. And I think that what's interesting about this, the pro, and I hate to say that there's a pro to anything that we're going through right here, but the pro is that now people, brands, everyone is forced to do digital, right? I feel like everyone's been talking about being digital first for so long. And now it's like, if you're not digital first, like you're not going to do anything. And so that's interesting, right? To kind of see the approach, and the things like concerts and like in events and conferences are all being canceled. So how do you shift those budgets to doing really effective stuff to engage people while they're just at home? But even beyond that too, it's like, I think that this changes just how we interact and talk and deal with people. And in this type of situation, that's also about being authentic, right? So this is why I think you're seeing some brands go out there and try to make an impact and try to start the conversation, while others are kind of holding back and just waiting for the right moment. So it's most certainly interesting to see, but definitely a pivot that we all have to make, right? It's like the people that are working from home to the brands themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's a hard time to think about it. I mean, from a technology provider perspective, we're like, we want to be helpful as much as possible at this time. We want to engage with people and have conversations. But at the end of the day, it's not a time to be going out and selling anything. It's a time to be saying like, hey, what can we do? Or what problems are you trying to solve? Or, during this downtime, how can we help you? I mean, and obviously we're talking on more of a business to business perspective, where a lot of the conversations that you're having are more on a business to consumer perspective, right? And that changes a little bit, but I think that leading with empathy and impact are probably the two areas that everybody's thinking about, whether you are B2B or B2C at this point in time.
Yes, certainly. It most certainly is. I also say too that like consumers have given to brands for so many years. So this is the opportunities for brands to actually turn around and give back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really true. I think there's been like so many really highlighting things that we've seen, where you've seen fashion industry people pivot and say like, hey, we're going to make masks now because that's what's needed. When maybe I was thinking of, I think it was Christian Siriano came out and said, hey, like we have the resources and the people to do this that are working from home. I can help make all these masks for our healthcare professionals. And it's like, that kind of stuff is really encouraging. And then, I think there's other people that are just, maybe it's celebrities who have influence that are able to, just drive awareness to certain things and allow people to be able to donate maybe money if they can at this time. It's not like everybody can go and volunteer time, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I mean, from your perspective, like what has changed? And is there going to be a new normal when we get through this, or are things not going to go back to normal? I mean, this could be marketing and advertising related, or just, life in general, but what are we going to be adjusting to as humans?
That's a great question. I think I can go so many different ways with this. I don't want to go doom and gloom, but my thought is, I think for so long companies felt that like they couldn't do this whole work from home thing. Right now that we're all forced to do work from home, everyone's probably realizing, what, it's not that bad. So I think on a business level, what we're going to see is probably a lot of office spaces closing because people are realizing that's a lot of money spent that doesn't need to be spent. On like a job perspective, I think now for all of us, we will no longer be competing for jobs with people in our area or city. We're going to be competing for jobs with people all over the world, right? So you know, who's to say that, you know, when someone's hiring now and they say, hey, I can hire this designer for $150,000 here in Manhattan, or get someone with the same, you know, level of experience in Alabama for 45, right? So I think it's going to get interesting in those perspectives. I think from a brand perspective, what I've seen that's been really interesting is this, okay, since conferences are now closed, how do we actually, how do we communicate with those same people? We've been doing a lot of stuff with AR, augmented reality, and creating these experiences where we can actually literally drop a panel into someone's room, right? Or have people actually sitting there and talking, have these one-to-one conversations back and forth. I've seen other really interesting things too, but I think that too many people are just going overboard with the Zoom things, and it's just getting a little exhausting.
Yeah, it is exhausting. I think, you know, I always remember the BBC interview that happened, and the guy had like his kids busting in on him. And I feel like that's me on a day-to-day basis, basically, you know, that's what's going on. And, you know,
Yeah.
at this point, I think we've adapted to just being like much more gracious to each other and understanding that people have like kids and dogs and parents and things that they're taking care of that are at home, and that's part of their life.
Well, did you see the CEO of Saatchi just walked, or the founder of Saatchi? Did you see that one?
No, I'm gonna
Yeah.
Google.
His partner was doing a live. I guess it looked like from the bathroom, and he walked by butt naked to the back of the scene. So yeah, interesting times.
Yeah, well, I actually am at my parents' right now in South Carolina, but I've been, you know, at home in Atlanta, and I set up my desk in my bedroom. And so I'm always like constantly making sure that my computer is closed, because that is probably one of my biggest fears, like
Yeah.
broadcasting live.
Well, that's the interesting thing too now, is I think that we're almost getting to learn our colleagues and our coworkers a lot more so than we ever have before, because now we're seeing like their families, we're seeing like where they live, we're seeing inside of their homes. And this is stuff that was like completely closed off a couple months ago.
Yeah, I think where it's been like business as usual. I mean, now when we kick off our weekly check-in, it's like we just do like a mental health check, like, hey, how are you doing? You know,
Yeah,
like what's really going on? Where have you been mentally? Have you gone out for a walk? Like, you know, how are you doing? And I feel like it's been good, because it just allows us to, you know, realize that we're all humans and we all have these struggles right now, and we're all adjusting, but, you know, feeling supported besides just your family support, which at times is even a bigger challenge, you know, when you're stuck inside the house with your the people you love the most, but, you know, can drive you crazy really fast too. So
we are being tested.
So, you know, when you think about shifting your approach from like a content creation, I mean, you've mentioned that you are thinking of things like AR and how to, you know, really connect with consumers. You know, what do you feel like you, maybe personally or professionally, what have you really grown? What areas have you grown in during these last, 2 months?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's grown more so than it's how do we refocus and shifts, right? So when I think about advertising and how we reach consumers, or even brands, you know, B2B or B2C, it's so different now, right? Because like I was a heavy, clear user of location-based technology, right? Because it allows us to understand where you're going, places you've been, all that stuff. But now it's like there's only one place that everyone, or two places, maybe three places where people are now: home, grocery store, or the gas station, right? So it's really kind of changed things, because it's like, okay, well, what are the other ways that are actually reaching these people? I've been doing a lot of investigation and looking into just like, what are the apps that people are spending their time? How are they spending their time on those apps? What sites? Like all this stuff, because I would assume that like mobile usage is now through the roof, right? Like it's berserk. And it'd be really interesting to just understand the types of content and why people in times of day and all that. But really is like what I've also learned in this time too, is like, I think everyone wants to be heard right now, right? And everyone has something to say. And because of all these different video platforms, be it Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams, even like TikTok, right? And Instagram Live, like people are expressing themselves in ways that we've never seen before. So I'd almost argue to say that right now we're probably seeing the best content, at least UGC, that we've probably ever seen, ever. I mean, we're seeing like live battles with, you know, Babyface and like all these different people. It's crazy, right? You would never see this stuff before.
Yeah.
So it's incredible to see.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that you know, when I think about what I've sort of learned, I'm like, well, one, I think that maybe I'm more of an introvert than I ever thought I was, because I don't totally hate being home
I'd agree.
often. And two, yes, like content creation, even though, yes, I do a weekly podcast and, you know, I talk on panels and moderate and do public speaking, like that. To me, it seems like it comes natural and I don't mind doing that. But at the same time, doing a TikTok video is like out of my comfort zone normally. But,
Yeah.
you know, I've got kids and they're like, let's do something fun and it's entertaining for them. And so I have like done several of those now with them, and I don't publish all of them, but but it's
I was gonna
fun,
say,
you know?
where are these?
Oh yeah. You're gonna have to dig hard for those. So it's like, it's fun, and it's something that you're like, okay, this is something that's definitely out of my comfort zone, but I'm gonna try and go there. And you
But
know,
I think,
figure that out.
but I think these platforms are also allowing us to see the worst in each other as well, right? Because now, especially for the folks that are single, right, in home and alone, or in cities where you're in a small space and confined, I mean, it is like being in prison, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're seeing mental health become like a real thing, right? Because a lot of things, people think like mental health is like a particular disease, or mental health is like schizophrenia. Mental health is like loneliness too, right? And things of that nature. And these video platforms, I believe we're seeing people actually use this to do things like I have a friend who's like total like introvert, and I'm not going to go into the type of business he has, but he has a business online. It was like only his business stuff, his work stuff. And then like as soon as like March hit, it's like him getting out of the shower, him eating breakfast, him doing lunch, him doing workouts, and then every night, like a party where he's like getting drunk by himself, listening to YouTube and dancing around his room. And you're like, wow, this is incredibly amazing, like hysterically funny stuff. But at the same time, you're like, I think he's losing his mind.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that. I think that mental health to me is just like a check-in, right? It is, everybody has a level of that, and where you function well. Right. And so I think that all of those levels are being challenged right now. And as you mentioned, it's going to be different for different people. So, you know, I would assume that being alone right now has its challenges, as does being with other people. You know, and there's just different things that are going to, you know, for me, having extra space is a huge blessing. But I realize like how important and you know, blessed I really am to have that, because you think of people that are, you know, in Manhattan and they're in apartments, and a lot of the conversations I'm having are with those people who are in, you know, small confined areas. And so it is about, you know, having access to like, what is the access that we have to sort of say like, here's where I am, or here's where I need to talk to somebody. And, you know, now more than ever, I think it's so important to be able to like have online healthcare, and not being, you know, about going to a doctor's office all the time. So
Telehealth, right? Totally.
I mean, if they had not built that up, you know, what, 5 or 6 years ago, then where would we be today?
Yeah.
It would be a whole nother issue. But is there anything else that you want to talk about while we're here? We've talked about a lot.
I think that one thing I'll say and I'll add is I know a lot of people out there who might not be influencers, and I'm not an influencer, right? I get labeled as one now, which is odd to me, but like by no means feel I'm an influencer. But I think that there are people out there who have a greater understanding about things like anxiety or mental health and things of that nature. And I would tell folks that are out there, like, don't just post about it, right? Like on Facebook or Instagram story, like, oh, I'm like, whatever, I'm dealing with this right now. Like, if, you know, I think that we should start a conversation, right? And don't be shy about it. I think that if you feel you understand these areas really well, and these are things that you've dealt with and problems you've resolved, then maybe like it's really simple to start a live stream on, let's say, Instagram, invite people in and actually have the conversation. I think now people need to hear these stories, and I think now people need to have these conversations so that we all know that we're not alone, that we're all dealing with some of the same things. I've put a bigger focus on right now, like Black health and the disparities we're actually seeing right now. And by no means am I like an expert, but I know that it affects people that look like me. So I've made an initiative to actually start these conversations and doing weekly live streams. I'm doing one this week with a young lady by the name of, well, I don't want to give her up. I can't do that because that's not the time yet. But another one named Tiana Bartoletto, right? Tiana Bartoletto is 2-time Olympian, 3-time gold medalist, 3-time world champion, and world record holder in track and field. and like we're doing like an exercise routine, and she's going to say, here's a 15-minute exercise you can do in your home with like little to no space. And this is just about people being healthier, right? And people of color, that's like a big issue right now with COVID and why we're dying. Doing another thing with a huge influencer next week by the name of Kevin Curry, Fit Men Cook. And he's going to be doing a big thing on like, hey, here's the proper things you could actually cook with minimal stuff in your refrigerator that's healthy. And then Mark Miliano, who's like the president and CEO of National Urban League, and we're going to talk about disparities. And again, these are all about, you know, starting the conversation, letting people hear it and understand they're not known, and also like providing tools to people right now. So there's a lot of people who know things about a lot of things. Like, go out there and have the conversation. It's super easy right now.
Yeah, I think compassion-led conversation is more important than ever because, you know, this COVID crisis is not, you know, it's definitely not like picking people based on any racial bias or profile, but I think that there are different people that are more exposed, you know, maybe people who still have to continue to work and different, you know, economic backgrounds and things that are going to get hit harder. And I think it's so important to have that conversation and just say like, how can I help? Or let me open up my eyes because maybe I didn't think there was a problem where there actually is a problem. So I think that it's just, I love the conversations that you've been having. And I mean, I've been able to join a few of them and listen in. And I think that they're so important. And the focus that you have, you know, just bringing up the challenges with Black health and how, you know, maybe there's a smaller percentage that makes up the population, but a larger percentage that is having these challenges. Yep. And so I think being aware of that allows people who are just saying that there's not a problem whatsoever to understand that there is a challenge and how can we address this, right? And how can we just be compassionate human beings?
Yeah,
everyone.
agreed.
So I love it. Where can people find you and follow you and, you know, engage in these conversations as well?
Sure. So I've been doing all of them on Instagram. So if you follow me at Third Gears, so it's at 3RDGEERS. And then that's it. Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
No, I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing with us all the exciting stuff you're doing, and, you know, keep up the good work. I think that you are an influencer, whether you want to admit it or not. And yeah, hopefully we can have you back on the show again in the future. So
amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, guys. We appreciate both of you coming on the show and for taking the time to share your COVID experience with us. We really appreciate it. And this whole sort of members at home series that we've been doing over these last number of weeks. So thank you so much for doing that. Okay, our last story now is a local one here in Canada. One of our members here in Toronto is a company called EQ Works. They're a well-known location data platform company up here as well. Probably one of the I think one of the biggest in the country, if not the biggest in the country. Gone through and acquired a bunch of the other players over the last number of years, but they announced a new partnership this past week with a company called Opta, OPTA. And excuse me, Opta is describes themselves as Canada's largest property location intelligence provider. So the whole thing here in blending what EQ has with what Opta has is about a new set of offerings leveraging location data around the insurance industry in particular up here. So they're all about sort of building a new set of products and you know, specializing on predictive modeling and some segmentation tools and so on to kind of help the insurance industry. So EQ sort of positioned themselves as they say they have Canada's richest device graph. And then you take Opta, which has sort of the information on the property side of residential and business property data, and then combining the two, you know, sort of really seen as a bit of a game changer for the insurance and financial services industry up here. So I think it's a good fit. I think it's a nice niche target audience to go after in particular. One quote that I really like, what's his name here? I lost it. Greg McCutcheon, who's the president of Opta, said, "We're committed to delivering tools that allow brokers and insurers to enhance their client relationships while improving their underlying competitiveness. We have insights on 13 million residences and more than 4.4 million business locations across Canada. And now we can offer insights into the behaviors of the people occupying them. So, they're a company obviously that well understands the properties themselves and, sort of the businesses aspect of it. But now by bringing EQ to the mix, can understand the actual people that live there or go there or work there or whatever, through the sort of movement side of the data as well. So good partnership. I like it. I think it's super interesting. Any thoughts?
Yeah, a couple. I do think it's a really interesting partnership. I think that there's a lot of need for this type of data, and not only from a marketing and consumer engagement standpoint, but I know that there's a lot of businesses, specifically, insurance or credit or finance, that really want to leverage this type of data. I would say the one concern I have or caveat that I think is there is making sure that the data that's leveraged is opted in data, and that we have good consumer scenarios set up in terms of like privacy and opting out, and being able to maybe sunset your data. That's something that I know we talk a lot on my team about, and making sure that we're always doing the right thing there. As I would assume that, I think that Canada seems to be a little bit even more, potentially more privacy sensitive than even the US. And so I think that I would assume that they're doing all of those things. But I do think that it's really interesting. I think that we're going to see a lot more of like the predictive modeling and leveraging that type of location data to do that. And also just help businesses be able to find valuable consumers, ones that might be looking for a change in insurance or, something like that. So yeah, I think this is, it is certainly a need, and businesses are asking for it. And I think us as consumers are always looking to have more relevant and valuable information given to us. So
Yeah, I
I like
agree with
it.
your comments. The what are your thoughts though, like just in general? I would love your sort of view on sort of the specializations, in verticals like this, like insurance. Obviously with my startup Ground Level, we're obviously focused on cannabis. But like it seems like there's more and more of the players in the industry, like in our industry, are starting to find these sort of, let's go and kind of do something unique just for this one vertical, that maybe is not applicable across multiple. What are your thoughts on that?
I think specialization is a great thing, right? I think that it gives you, well, from a startup perspective, I think it gives you the ability to scale quickly and be well known for, a tool set, right? Or a specific thing that you can offer a niche industry. Where I think the challenge can come in is whenever you're leveraging data for saying like, should we insure this person, or should we employ this person, or do they have good credit? I know here, like we've seen some of even like the credit bureaus wanting to do more of like the identity graphing and things of that nature. And to me, I sort of question how that's going. What's the longevity of that? Like, is legislation going to come into play at some point in time? Are consumers going to say like, I don't want to, share that information with them because now I'm going to get a less favorable rate because they know X, Y, and Z about me. So I think that it has to be a balance, but I do think that to your point about like going and pretty specialized on something like this and building out that predictive model for a specific industry, it makes a lot of sense because it resonates and it's just really easy. And then if you decide, in your case, an example, like with Ground Level, right? Yeah, it is cannabis and it's very specialized, but that doesn't mean that another regulated trade might come to you at some point and they say, hey, you're doing a really great job with this. Like, we want to replicate this with industry X.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to go there versus being like, hey, we can serve every industry. It's harder to go like really deep that way, I think. But you know this.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And when you were talking about the sort of the privacy piece and sort of using the data for whether or not someone's going to get a loan or whatever, I remembered now, like I'm reaching back like 9 years, something like that. So around the same time Foursquare was really big as a consumer platform, like because they started in 2010, so like 2011 ish, around there. So In Russia, there was a Foursquare-like platform in Russia called Alter Geo. And these guys, right from day one, that's what they were all about. They were working with the, sort of the mortgage lenders and the insurance companies and whatnot. And they would track, sort of the movements of consumers. And then basically the guys deciding to give you a loan or give you a mortgage or whatever would weigh in on your sort of behavioral habits of whether or not you were a risky investment for them or not. And I think it's a jurisdictional thing, right? Like I think some countries like that have much more sort of lax privacy types of rules, you can get away with those kinds of things. In North America, that's not going to happen, right? It's just not, and the same goes for even things like we're seeing right now with contact tracing, for example, in COVID, right? Mm-hmm. South Korea and China and, Singapore and these countries, are doing all sorts of things. Whereas over here, we're still battling, it's going to be an opt-in thing from Apple and Google and this, and, I don't know.
And I'm sure you saw the recent announcement now that they're not even going to, be opening that up like we initially thought they would. So,
I think there's, it's, every market will have its own thing, but I do think there's something to these vertical specializations. So anyhow, thank you. To our audience, again, you've been listening to episode number 463 of Location Weekly. Thank you for tuning in each week. Please let us know if you have story ideas, if you guest ideas, reach out to us. We just thank you for listening and watching, and please stay healthy, safe, and well. And hopefully we're all back together sooner rather than later in the real world. So, all right, take care, everyone. Have a good week. Bye.
Bye.